Once upon a time, in a quiet village called Kuru, everyone lived happily. The village was surrounded by tall, lush trees, and its inhabitants followed special rules. One very important rule was that all girls had to remain pure until marriage. In other words, they had to be virgins. This rule was essential to the people of Kuru, and everyone made sure to abide by it. The parents in the village took great pride in this tradition, believing their daughters were pure and cherishing this belief deeply. They would often boast to one another, saying that their daughters were pure like all the girls in Kuru. This was a point of pride and honor, a sign of good upbringing and respect for their customs. However, one day, something unexpected happened. A terrible misfortune struck the village, and it was revealed that only a true virgin could lift this curse. There was also a promise that the virgin maiden who helped with the sacrifice would marry the prince, and her parents would receive many gifts and money. Excited by the prospect of their daughters becoming royal in-laws, every parent eagerly brought their daughters to the palace, confident that their girls were virgins and eager to win the prize and restore peace to the village. As the crowd gathered, a Baj stepped forward, holding a large pot. He addressed everyone, saying, "In this pot is a special necklace blessed by the gods. Only a true virgin maiden can pull it out. This is the test the gods have given us to find the ones who will make the sacrifice." The girls lined up nervously while their parents watched confidently. One by one, the girls dipped their hands into the pot, but each time they came up empty-handed. The air grew tense as the first girl tried, then the second, and so on. Each girl came up empty, and murmurs among the crowd grew louder. Then it was the turn of the chief's daughters, known for their grace and beauty. The first daughter stepped forward confidently, but she too could not find the necklace. The second daughter tried and failed as well. Finally, the youngest daughter reached in with trembling hands, but she also came up empty. The villagers were stunned. Whispers filled the air. How can this be? Not even the chief's daughters? The elders exchanged worried glances, puzzled and concerned. They had always believed that the girls in the village were pure, upholding the traditions they cherished, but now it seemed something had gone horribly wrong. News of the failed test spread quickly through the village, causing disbelief and shock. The girls started shouting, "It's not our fault! It's Auntie Isime!" As rumors flew, attention turned to Isime, the stranger from the city. Villagers began to murmur, blaming her for the chaos and misfortune that had befallen their once peaceful home. "She came here and changed everything," an elder woman muttered. "Our girls used to follow the traditions. Now look at what has happened." Another villager agreed, saying, "Isime brought city ways to our village. She made the girls forget who they are." And so the story begins. Long ago, a girl named Isime came to visit her aunt in the village of Kuru. Isime was from the big city and was very beautiful. She always wore bright and revealing clothes that caught everyone's eye. Isime walked through the village with confidence, as if she were a queen, and everyone noticed her, especially the men. As Isime walked by, the men would whisper, "Wow, look at her, she's so beautiful." The village girls watched her too, admiring how she dressed and walked, wishing they could be like her. "I want to wear clothes like Isime," one girl said. Another girl added, "She looks so confident and pretty." The girls in the village didn't know much about Isime, but they were fascinated by her. They liked how she seemed so different and exciting. Isime's bright clothes and confident walk were unlike anything they had seen before. They began to wonder what it would be like to receive all the attention that Isime got. "Isime is so cool," said one of the girls. "I want to be just like her." And so they watched her closely, hoping to learn more about her and maybe become like her someday. But little did they know Isime had a secret that would change everything in the village. Isime had a secret that no one in the village knew. The men who admired her beauty were giving her gifts and money, but it wasn't just because she was pretty. Isime was secretly meeting with these men, and in exchange for their gifts, she spent time with them in a way that the village would not approve of. One day, Asabi, the chief's daughter, became curious about why Isime always seemed to have new things and money. Asabi decided to follow Isime quietly to find out what was going on. She saw Isime meeting with a man in a hidden spot, and then Isime walked away with a small bag of money. Asabi was surprised and thought, "So this is Isime's secret. The men give her gifts for being with them." She wondered if she could get gifts too. Asabi had always been a good girl, following the village's rules, but now she was curious. She wanted to feel special, like Isime did. The next day, Asabi saw a young merchant who had been looking at her for a while. She decided to try what she had seen Isime do. Asabi talked to the merchant and agreed to meet him in secret. The merchant gave her gifts and money just like he did with Isime. Asabi was excited and felt special. "This is so easy," she thought. "I can get nice things too." She felt like she had discovered something amazing and couldn't wait to tell her friends. Little did she know this secret was going to cause big changes in the village. Asabi couldn't keep her discovery to herself. She told her friends about Isime's secret and how easy it was to get gifts and money from men. "All you have to do is spend time with them and they'll give you nice things." As Asabi explained, her friends were shocked at first, but then they became curious too. Soon more girls in the village started to follow Isime's example. They began wearing makeup and dressing in ways that would catch the men's attention. They wanted to feel special and get gifts, just like Isime and Asabi. They whispered to each other, "If Isime and Asabi can do it, why can't we?" Isime noticed the change in the village girls and saw an opportunity. She started organizing meetings between the girls and the men, taking a share of the gifts and money the girls received. Isime told them, "I'll set everything up, and all you have to do is be nice to the men." The girls trusted her and followed her instructions. They loved the attention and gifts they got from the men. They felt special and enjoyed the new things they could buy with the money. They started to forget about the village's important traditions of staying pure and respecting themselves. The excitement of receiving gifts made them forget the values they had grown up with. As more and more girls joined in, it became like a secret club. They kept everything hidden from their parents and the village elders. The girls thought they were just having fun, but they didn't realize the trouble they were getting into. The secret was spreading, and it was changing the village in ways no one expected. Over time, more and more girls in the village started to join Isime's secret meetings with the men. What began as a few girls seeking gifts turned into a common practice. The girls would meet with the men not just for the gifts anymore, but for the attention and excitement it brought them. They felt admired and special, and that feeling became more important than the gifts themselves. The village elders and parents had no idea what was happening. They continued with their daily lives, believing that the village's traditions were still being followed. The elders often spoke about the importance of purity and respect, thinking the girls were listening and following their teachings. Little did they know that the strong tradition of keeping the girls pure until marriage was being broken. The girls kept the secret well hidden. They acted normally around their families, attending village gatherings and participating in daily chores. But behind closed doors, they were living a different life, one that went against everything the village stood for. The taboo of meeting men in secret had become the norm among the village girls. They no longer felt shame or guilt about their actions. Instead, they saw it as a new way of life that gave them freedom and attention. They had drifted far from the values they had been taught, and the once strong traditions were quietly crumbling, unnoticed by the elders and parents. One day, something terrible happened in the village of Kuru. Plants began to wither. Their leaves turned brown and dry. The animals, usually so full of life, started getting sick and dying. Worst of all, the villagers themselves began to suffer. Many people fell ill with strange symptoms that no one had seen before. It was a dark and frightening time for everyone. The villagers were scared and confused. They didn't know what was causing the sudden misfortune. They had always followed their traditions and respected the gods, or so they thought. Desperate for answers, they decided to visit the oracle Agaj, who was known for his wisdom and connection to the spiritual world. The villagers gathered at Abaj's home, their faces filled with worry. The elders spoke first, explaining the situation and asking Agaj what they could do to stop the curse. Agaj listened carefully, his eyes closed as if deep in thought. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "The gods are angry," Agaj said solemnly. "They are displeased with the village because the traditions have been broken. The purity that was once held dear has been lost. To appease the gods, a great sacrifice must be made. 2 virgin maidens must carry the sacrifice to the sacred altar." The villagers gasped. The idea of a sacrifice was serious, but even more alarming was the mention of virgin maidens. The village elders, who had always believed that all the young girls were pure, looked worried. They trusted that their traditions had been followed, but now they were not so sure. Agaj continued, "The sacrifice must be made within 2 days. If not, the curse will grow stronger, and more suffering will come upon the village." The villagers left Abaj's home, their hearts heavy with concern. They knew they had to act quickly to find 2 virgin maidens for the sacrifice. The village had always prided itself on the purity of its girls, but now, with the strange behavior of the past few months, doubts began to creep in. The once strong belief in their traditions was shaken, and the weight of the curse loomed over them. Then, the next morning, the town crier walked through the village, ringing his bell and shouting, "All young maidens, come to the palace! All young maidens, come to the palace!" His voice echoed through the streets, and soon every family heard the call. The villagers knew this was about the important sacrifice that Agaj had spoken of. The following day, all the girls and their parents came to the palace. When the virgin pot test was performed for all the girls by Agaj, it was discovered that no girl in the village was a virgin anymore. Isime had turned them all into prostitutes. Back in the present, Abaj's voice broke the long silence of the story. "The gods see everything," he said gravely. "Their anger is clear. We must continue the search, for without the sacrifice, the curse will not be lifted." The villagers realized the seriousness of the situation. The purity they had taken for granted was gone, and the girls who were supposed to represent the village's pride and tradition had failed the test. Now they faced the grim reality that finding the right maidens might be harder than they thought. The weight of the curse felt heavier than ever, and the village was filled with a sense of dread and urgency. The blame quickly shifted to Isime, who had become the symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The villagers believed that her influence had led the girls astray, causing them to abandon their traditions and bring the wrath of the gods upon them. The elders shook their heads, filled with disappointment and anger. Isime's parents, who lived in the city, soon heard about the trouble their daughter had caused. They were shocked and ashamed. Her father, a stern man who valued discipline, was furious. "We should have raised her better," he said, his voice full of regret. "We were too lenient, and now she's brought shame upon us." Isime's mother, who had often defended her daughter's actions, felt a deep sadness. "I should have been stricter," she admitted. "I let her do as she pleased because she was our only child. Now look at the mess she's made." As the villagers continued to talk, Isime felt the weight of their blame. She realized the impact of her actions and the trouble she had caused. The once admired girl from the city was now seen as the root of all the problems in Kuru. The villagers demanded that she take responsibility, as they believed she was the one who had led their daughters into breaking the sacred traditions. The village was in turmoil, and the blame on Isime grew heavier with each passing day. Her influence had turned the girls away from their values, and now the village faced the consequences. The elders decided that something had to be done to restore order and make amends with the gods. The fate of the village rested on what would happen next, and all eyes were on Isime to see how she would face the consequences of her actions. The elders and villagers gathered to decide what must be done. With no virgin maidens found and the curse still upon the village, they turned to Isime, the one they believed had brought this misfortune. The decision was made. Isime would carry the sacrifice alone as penance for the chaos she had caused. Isime stood before the village, feeling a mix of fear and regret. She looked at the faces of the villagers, all of whom were angry and disappointed. Her parents, who had rushed from the city, stood helplessly by. They could not protect her from the consequences of her actions. The oracle Agaj handed her the calabash filled with offerings for the gods. "You must take this to the sacred altar in the forest," he said. "You will walk alone. This is your burden to bear." With the heavy calabash on her head, Isime began her journey. She walked through the village, past the disapproving stares and whispers of the people. As she entered the dense forest, she felt truly alone. The trees closed in around her, and the path became more challenging. For 2 days, she walked without rest, her feet aching and her spirit heavy. While walking, Isime thought about everything that had happened. She remembered the excitement and attention she had received from the men, the way the village girls had admired her and wanted to be like her. Now she realized how shallow and fleeting that attention had been. It had led them all astray from the values and traditions that had kept the village safe and happy. Tears streamed down Isime's face as she trudged on, feeling deep regret for the harm she had caused, not just to herself but to the entire village. She understood now that her actions had consequences, and that those consequences had brought suffering to everyone. Finally, exhausted and weary, Isime reached the sacred altar deep in the forest. She placed the calabash on the altar and knelt before it, crying out to the gods for forgiveness. She prayed for the curse to be lifted and for the village to find peace again. In that moment, Isime felt the full weight of her actions and the pain they had caused. As she stood up to leave, a sense of quiet acceptance settled over her. She knew she had to face whatever came next with courage, even if it meant being separated from her family and the life she once knew. Isime's journey was not just a physical one. It was a journey of realization and repentance, and she hoped that somehow the village could heal from the wounds her actions had caused. After completing her journey, Isime returned to the village. As she walked through the forest and back into Kuru, she noticed a change in the air. The villagers gathered, watching her with a mixture of relief and lingering anger. The plants that had withered began to show signs of life again, and the sick animals started to recover. The curse had been lifted, but the consequences for Isime were far from over. The elders stood before the village, and Agaj spoke. "The gods have accepted the sacrifice," he announced. "The curse is lifted, but Isime must face the consequences of her actions. She is not permitted to leave the village for 12 years. During this time, she will be responsible for carrying all sacrifices to the gods." The villagers murmured in agreement. They were relieved that the curse had ended but still held resentment towards Isime. As part of her punishment, Isime was given a small hut near the shrine, isolated from the rest of the village. The villagers avoided her, and she was treated as an outcast. Isime spent her days fulfilling her duties, carrying sacrifices and maintaining the shrine. She lived in solitude, reflecting on the choices she had made and the lives she had affected. The once bright and lively girl from the city was now a shadow of her former self, burdened by the weight of her past actions. Meanwhile, the village worked to restore their traditions. They reinforced the importance of purity and respect for their cultural values to protect their way of life. The elders decided that no one from the city would be allowed into Kuru. They wanted to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Isime's story became a cautionary tale for the children of Kuru. Parents would tell them about the girl who came from the city and brought trouble to their village. They spoke of how important it was to respect traditions and make good choices. Isime's life served as a reminder of the consequences of straying from the path of respect and honor. For 12 long years, Isime remained in the village, isolated and alone. She lived with the regret of her actions and the knowledge that she had brought shame upon herself and her family. Her punishment was not just physical, but also a deep emotional and spiritual journey. She learned that true beauty and worth come from within and that respecting one's culture and traditions is vital. As the years passed, the village slowly healed, but the memory of what had happened stayed with them. Isime's story was passed down through generations, a lesson in humility, respect, and the importance of making wise choices. It was a sad ending for Isime, but it was also a lesson learned for the village of Kuru, reminding them of the strength and value of their cultural heritage. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment on what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting stories like this one. Thank you.